Welcome to my 7.21D patch impressions stream. This is the first time I've read through this, so you will have to forgive me if I make errors that are wrong, because I prefer to go through these live and give you my initial off-the-hip thoughts rather than do a bunch of research, because that's how I like to live my life. Okay, I have not watched the Dream League games as a whole. Probably will check them out afterwards, but I did check some of the win rates previous to this, so I can hopefully explain some of the buffs and nerfs. Keep in mind where we are in the Dota cycle right now is that immediately after the major finishing, there are open qualifiers pretty much right at the end of it, and then after those there's regional qualifiers. So right after the major ends, there are qualifiers for the next major, and the next major is the MDL major in Disneyland in France, or in Paris. I know it's in France. I don't know if it's in Paris, though. Anyways, so the major qualifiers are coming up right now, which means that the patch can't be massive. There isn't a lot of time, basically, for the patch to change. Usually when it happens is right after the major qualifiers will happen, then the minor qualifiers happen, and then there's like a month break, usually, before the minor happens. So the big patch usually comes after all the qualifiers are done, and we're right at the point where the qualifiers are about to go full bore, basically. So the patch is not likely to be massively different. It's probably going to be lots of small fixes and changes to items. So with that in mind, let's take a look at what we're going through here. Dire Hard camp pull is now easier to do. The problem with the Dire Hard camp, and I know that there's a lot of people that talk about the win ratio differences between Radiant side and Dire side. Radiant has a much higher win rate. It's probably for like just simple map things where it's easier to do the Dire pull, for example. This would be Dire Hard Camp pull to the lane. The Radiant side one is pretty easy to do. The way that you do it is you need to cut trees to the right side of it, and then you can pull it directly into your lane, kind of like how you could do it back in the day. It's much easier to do if you cut the trees. The Dire Camp is really difficult to do. If you get a small camp or a slow camp like the Satyrs, it's very difficult to pull the Dire Camp into the lane unless you're pulling as the Radiant off lane. So it should be easier to do the pull. I don't know if that also means it's going to be easier to connect the hard camp to the small camp. I would guess it does. It would probably just has a slightly bigger leash, meaning that the amount of time after you aggro the camp that it walks back. If they just increase the leash by a little bit, you should still be able to pull it. And this should make Dire safe laning a lot easier now, because now you can do that pull and deny lane creeps, which gives you an advantage. So that's the first change. In terms of items, Aeon Disc recipe is reduced to encourage people to buy it more. Guarding Greaves is increased in cost. Guarding Greaves is very good right now because the last patch, or at least a couple patches ago, the cooldown of Guarding Greaves was tied to, or the disable of it. You can't like get multiple people to buy Guarding Greaves, because then everybody would buy Greaves more or less, or you'd buy multiples. That way you could burst heal your whole team against AoE nukes. But they changed it so that that disable that prevents another Greaves from affecting you is now tied to the cooldown of the Greaves itself. So if you buy Greaves on heroes that have cooldown reducers, or buy Octarine Core, it's really effective because you can heal your team more often. If you buy Greaves on Dazzle, for example, he's got 50% cooldown reduction by level 18. That means you can Greaves a lot more often than everybody else. You could mend every 20 seconds instead of 40. So now it's a much better item. A lot of cores are buying it these days. Shadow Fiends are buying it. Vipers are definitely buying it every single game because it gives you regen and armor and heal, all that good stuff, plus mana. So they're increasing the cost by a little bit to offset that because the item is getting more popular. It is a very good boots, so it makes a lot of sense that it's completely reasonable for them to nerf it a little bit. Rod of Atos is like the new item that everybody's in love with right now. The item has been shit for pretty much its entire existence. I don't think the item had ever been viably bought often until the last couple months, and there's a couple reasons for this. Number one, there aren't a ton of items that give buttloads of stats right now. And this item has been pretty high stats for its existence, but right now the buildup is really easy. It's 2 crowns, which is plus 4 stats. You can buy those from the side shop. So if you're playing any kind of like an int caster, the stat abundance is really, really nice. Even on heroes that aren't necessarily int heroes, it's good. Rod of Atos on Viper, for example, is really popular because really the item only gives you 8 more stats in int. So even if you cast a little bit of spells, the other stats that it gives are really effective. It's not a good right-click damage item, of course, unless you're maybe like an int hero, or you deal damage based on spells, then it's effective. That's why Vipers buy it. It's also a good solution to cancel TPs now. So that's the other big change, is that roots have been buffed quite a bit recently. so that you can't escape. You can't use things like phase shift. You can't use things like leap or other blink abilities if you're rooted, which has been the case for some of those, but not all of them. So roots are just across the board better, and you can break TPs. So basically for any heroes that in the past would buy Yules to break TPs, Rod of Atos is now better. So Atos is being bought on Razor because Razor likes to initiate with static link and cast his ultimate. Now he can do that and cast Rod of Atos to root them for an extra 2 seconds to build up damage while they can't run away. And it helps him basically chase down people that are trying to get away while also becoming tanky. So anybody that's like tanky that also wants to chase or that needs stat items and is a little bit hard to land their disables, Rod of Atos is excellent right now. Usually on cores. I don't like it on supports because it's inexpensive. It's $27.50, but it still takes a while to build that. By the time a support can finish a Rod of Atos, usually they're at the point where their opponents already have another solution, or other supports will go for a Glimmer Cape or a Force Staff and be able to finish it, which kind of counters the Rod. But if you're playing like a mid roll or a farming roll, you can get the Rod of Atos at a point where your opponents don't have an item solution to it yet. So Rod of Atos has been very popular lately. It's not necessarily super busted yet, but it's definitely an item that has usurped things like Yule's Scepter as like a cancel TP solution right now. So the cooldown is now 18 seconds instead of 16, and the cast range has been reduced by a little bit. The cast range is freaking huge. But they had to buff this item in so many ways because nobody bought the damn thing for literally years and years and years. It's been in the game for a very long time, but nobody would ever buy it. But it's in. And people like it now. Solar Crest target attack speed increase and reduction change from 70 to 80. So this is actually a buff to Solar Crest. I'm slightly surprised about this because it has been an occasional buy by teams, but it's probably been kind of going out of favor, especially because Medallion to Solar Crest is a really big cost change. Medallion's 1,200. Going all the way up to Solar Crest is another 2,600 gold, which is kind of a lot. And that's putting a Windlace into the item, which is nice. You're putting 10 attributes in, which is okay, but for a support, that's kind of garbage. For cores, it's often kind of garbage. It seems to be like a good offlane item, because those kinds of heroes can usually afford the cost, and they're not necessarily, offlane heroes are often like initiators and stuff, they're not necessarily the ones hitting towers, so it's very easy to use it on an ally. It's a great item to use on allies. It's not very good to use on enemies. It's like kind of okay for heroes like Clinks, it can be good, because it does lower armor by 12, which is a lot, and the lowered reduced movement speed, reduced attack speed is cool, but the reduced attack speed on enemies is not as useful by far as it is to use it on allies to increase their attack speed. So it's more of like a use on allies to siege towers item, generally more than it is a help kill that guy item. So a little buff to that, but not massive, just 10 attack speed. Arc Ward and agility gain increased by 0.3 per level, so that's going to increase your attack speed and your damage by a little bit of armor. And the Tempest Double duration has increased, so this is just a pretty moderate buff to the hero. Makes it easier to use Midas, makes it easier to get more value out of your Tempest Double. The cooldown now, what's 40 seconds, and there's a cooldown reduction talent built into the hero of 8%. So that's going to reduce it by like, it's like a little bit less than 4 seconds. So we're basically talking 36-second cooldown and a 24-second uptime. So that part's pretty huge, especially considering that the Tempest Double duration is now increased twice within 7.21 patch. It used to be 18 seconds, now it's up to 24. That extra 6 seconds is a really big deal, and it's going to make the Tempest Double a little bit more of like an illusion in the sense that like it's pretty much always going to be there. Like in the late game, you can pretty much have it up all the time rather than just using it. I mean, I don't play Arc Warden. I do like microing. I have at various points been like, yeah, Arc Warden's really interesting. I'd like to play him more, but I've never really played him that much. But I could definitely see this potentially expanding his playstyles to be less just like AFK farm split push into there could be more builds that allow him to actually just constantly fight with your team maybe. But it's hard to get past the benefit of having the ability to send like a hero double with Boots of Travel across the map to go push waves or do something like that. And keep in mind that this is only late game, so this is level 18 and on, where it becomes really, really effective. So, yeah, I don't know. Kind of cool. I think Arc Warden's kind of a cool hero. I just wish he was less AFK farm-based, personally. I think he'd be more fun, more interesting, if that was the case. Axe strength gain increased by a tiny bit. Broodmother base damage increased by 3 to help her contest last hits. Double edge damage increase. Basically, it'll make her better in the laning stage. And the axe gain or strength gain is a very small buff. But it'll make like his resistance items like armor and strength or armor and magic resistance be more effective. So, you know, it could make a difference. Double-edged damage increased by 20% at all levels, and the level 20 talent is increased as well. The retaliate damage, it's pretty big. I got to remember how his skills work. So it's a flat return damage, but yeah, so it's a flat return damage. But if you get hit by heroes, you can activate it to give you a percentage base damage increase for 20 seconds. And this talent will just increase the amount of damage that people take if they attack Centaur directly. I do kind of like that it's at level 20. I think that's kind of cool. I actually really like where Centaur's talents are right now. I think they're in a pretty good place between all of them. Double-edged strength damage. I don't know, I haven't played Centaur very much, but it does seem like you can do some pretty interesting things with his talents. They're trying to bring him back as often here. I think I saw some tweets about Centaur. I think he was played at the tournament, but I'm not sure how much. Hoof Stomp duration is definitely very appealing, 1.5 seconds, but if you can get your retaliate damage to plus 70, and then also get an aura, like that could be a really good counter to like Windrangers and stuff like that. Or pretty much any right clickers that are slightly weak to physical damage. Chen Divine Favor duration reduced. I think that is a really good solution. So that's actually a pretty big nerf to the skill, actually. I think it's time for a calculator, I think. Because the biggest change is going to be the change to the regen, because it gives you 7 per second. So before you were getting 7 times 14 health. So 98 HP. That's actually not true because you'd also get a heal increase of 25. So while that's active, it would actually heal you for 122.5 HP regen, which is kind of crazy for 70 mana. So you could basically use it on you level 1 and you would trade hits with the enemy hero. You would deal... Change so many numbers. 8 times 3. Was it really that much? No, that's for creeps. It would be an 8 damage increase. You would heal for 122 HP, and it would increase your base regen by 25%. So it's actually a pretty good heal. But now, because the duration is lower, it's just 7 times 8 times 1.25. So it gives you 70 HP, which is still good. And you can obviously still use it in conjunction with the Tango. If you eat a Tango, and the Tango's going, and you cast Divine Favor on yourself, you're increasing your Tango regen by 25% as well. So it's still a really good ability in terms of regen burst stuff, So this is just going to make it worse as a trading ability at level 1. So it'll make Chen worse at level 1 and level 2 a little bit. Maxing the ability out is still probably worth it, but I'm still a big fan of getting the third skill semi-maxed out. You can still play Chen the normal way, in my opinion, especially because he does have an experience gain talent, I think. Yeah, he's got an experience talent at 10. So you can get your 3 base skills leveled up relatively fast if you do a decent job on that. Elder Dragon Form, slow, increased to 40, just to make Dragonite a little bit better late game. It does feel like his level 3 ultimate it's great, but the slow feels a little bit mediocre. I'm not sure if that's just like a movement speed thing where everybody can get really fast or not, but and also buffs to his talents. Basically all the talents that people don't get very often. 25% on his Breathe Fire. I think that's really needed. The 20 was pretty underwhelming seeming. And the 3 mana regen is fantastic for solving his mana problems. More health instead of damage, and more GPM instead of strength, and 2 seconds for the Dragon Tail stun. So let's look at his actual base numbers here to compare for this. So that means that you can reduce damage by 50% on the skill for 11 seconds. So that's pretty freaking amazing, I must say. Basically, if anybody builds a lot of base stats, like Chaos Knight, for example, builds a lot of strength items, or agility heroes like Naga Siren, Breathe Fire is going to be really effective against them because it's going to reduce half of their damage. Terrablade's another really good example. It's going to reduce a lot of their base damage. Breathe Fire's excellent for that. The health talent can be good some games. I think I had one game where I had to play solo mid, and I went Dragon and I got a Radiance. I think I got the health. I might have gotten the health talent that game. But between the health talent and the strength gain, it's a lot of survivability. 180 GPM is pretty appealing though. I don't know how fast you can get to level 20, but if you're doing a good job, you probably can get there fast. And Dragon Tail stun would now be a 5.25 second stun. So it'd be instead of a 5-second stun. So just a small buff to that, because almost always people go for the HP regen and armor on Dragon Blood, because it's an extra 16 regen and an extra 12 armor, which is really appealing. But, I mean, 5-second stun on Dragon Tail is ridiculously good. Can be really effective against a lot of heroes, especially if you're like a ganker or an initiator at the start of the fight, like Blink stun. Drow agility gain increased, good for her, and base agility increased by 6 with base damage unchanged. So basically the Drow nerfs, I mean, she was still played semi-recently when she was played mid, but she got a little over-nerfed. It wasn't directly, though. The way that she got nerfed was, keep in mind that you could one-shot neutrals with your marksmanship. Say chance to proc, which would basically Drow Rangers would go mid, they would hit 6, and then they would just go jungle, and they would level up stupidly fast. And the way they would do this is by buying a lot of Wraith Bands to increase your attack speed and damage. They go like Treads Wraith Bands, and then they would auto-attack Ancients. And the Ancients, when they get one shot, are a stupid amount of golden experience. So you could look at the scoreboard, and Drows would always be stupidly high level. So they nerfed it. One of the ways they nerfed it, and this is not necessarily just a Drow nerf, but they halved the amount of Ancient camps on the map. There's only 1 camp instead of 2. So that means you can't necessarily like kill the Ancient camp, walk across the map to the other Ancient camp, kill that one, and go back and forth. I don't necessarily know if they were doing that for sure, because I don't play Drow that much, and I don't watch replays. But I am sure that the reduction in amount of Ancient camps is going to make that worse. So to compensate, they have now buffed her agility gain and base agility. So that means she will attack slightly faster, deal slightly more damage, and also gain more attack speed from her aura. And also 6 more agility here also increases her aura attack speed. So this is a pretty, I think this number right here is pretty decent. I mean, it's not the biggest thing in the world, right? Because it's only 20% of that 6. So she's getting 1.2 extra attack speed from her precision aura at level 1. But, you know, it adds up a little bit. But that's probably why she's the ancient change probably lowered her win rates a lot, I would guess. So as a result, little buffs here. Base armor increased by 2 for Earthshaker. That's freaking insane. My God, 2 armor? 2 armor? He's already got a massive strength gain. His agility gain is god awful. So this isn't like the most broken thing, because it's not like his armor becomes respectable later. But 2 base armor increase is huge. That's like approximately 10%. Health increase at level 1, makes his regen go 10% farther, all of that. That's a really big buff to the hero. Could make him more viable as an offlane hero. Certainly is going to make him more viable as a support. You'll definitely be able to trade better. I mean, arguably you could get freaking enchant totem level 1 and walk up and hit somebody for, you know, 110 damage. But 2 armor is huge. That's a huge buff for Earthshaker. Enchantress base strength increased by 1, so 19 health? 20 health. Okay. God, I can't remember. There's been so many changes. Let's fix this quick. Base int goes up by 2 as well. Where are we at, Enchantress? So that's an extra, let me just double check so I don't mess it up. 12 mana times 2, so 24. An extra 24 mana level 1. That's actually pretty big. It's really hard for her to cast her heal. It'll make her as a support more viable. I'm a little surprised they're buffing her when they're nerfing Chen, but I'm probably out on meta. Seems like Chen is popular, but Enchant is not. But I know some teams were playing Enchant support when I was at ESL and watching we play. Gyrocopter base damage increased by 3. Thank the fucking Lord. I'm a big Gyro fan, man. I really like playing him. I don't like playing him with IO. Like, I just like playing the hero because I think he's fun. He's like a spell-based carry. You run around, you're mobile. I think that's really cool. But his base damage was so atrocious. It was 37 to 47. That means his base damage was, on average, 42. It was fucking impossible the last hit against contested heroes, like enemy heroes that are contesting you. And you're a ranged hero, so you can't even solve the problem with a Quelling Blade. It's awful. And Wraith Bands do less damage. So just last hitting with this guy is awful. I think buying Quelling is genuinely a solution, because you're spending 200 gold to get 7 damage, which is better than buying a Wraith Band. It's a lot cheaper, for example, but God, did he need a base damage increase. The problem is that his viability was so tied to an IO that they just couldn't buff him. So for the longest time, it's just been like a pain in the ass, basically, to want to play the hero without IO. But a base damage increase was so fucking needed. So needed. Very pleased to see this. I think you can probably start a Quelling Blade on this here. I don't necessarily think you should. You don't necessarily need to start the item, but I think it's not a bad idea to get it. The other problem with him in a laning stage is that Rocket Barrage is garbage if it's not one hero, basically. Even like 2 heroes, it's still pretty good. It does what? 10 rockets per second. Rocket damage is 70. And it lasts 3 seconds, so 70 times 3. It does 210 magic damage at level 1, which is great for a level 1 skill. It's really, really good. But if there's 2 heroes, it becomes less viable. So against the power of dual lanes, Rocket Barrage is not as good. Homing Missile is okay. It's 100 damage, but that's max. The minimum, does it go up anymore? I don't think the damage goes up anymore. It just does damage. So between like Homing Missile and Rocket Barrage, it's really good. But look at your mana pool. You've only got 303 mana. It's not that much. So you can't actually really spam these spells that much. Like, you can use Rocket Barrage twice in a fight for sure, but again, it's 210 damage. That's like it's like a tango and a half. So you don't really have the best mana on this hero. Maybe you need to buy Soul Ring or something on the guy. Aquilo is obviously mandatory, so he has like mana problems now, and like you don't really jungle that well with Flat Cannon because the cooldown's so high. So it's like your laning is kind of, you need a lot of levels basically. Your laning's kind of inefficient, and your base damage was bad. So almost everything about the hero is kind of garbage, unfortunately. So very pleased to see the buffs. The health buff is fine. I don't know if I would get that. Maybe if you just buy a lot of stat items and then go health would be the way to go. But he can be kind of tanky. Maybe there's situations where he's really effective as like an early fighter with like drum and health talent or something. But I'm not sure. Slightly disappointed in the hero leading up until now. Maybe Atos is good. You could go Atos on the hero. Probably be overkill with health though. But I really like the Eggs build. That's my favorite on him. Jug Omni Slash cooldown increased by 10 seconds. This is a buff to Ags, arguably. Ags Juggernaut will lower the cooldown to 70 seconds. But Omni Slash is really good. It's a really good ability in ability draft too. It's fucking ridiculous actually, because you compare Omni Slash, you can pair it with other abilities that make your attacks better. So I got it with Fervor that one game. That was insane. So every time I Omni Slashed, I attacked a little bit faster. It was ridiculous. I also had it with Fiery Soul. It was kind of insane pairing the two together. But that was very fun. Omni Slash with Fervor, man. So I just bought an Axe to reduce the cooldown, and I could Omni Slash all the time. Less Diabolic Edict damage reduced. This is at level 1. It explodes 40 times. So that means 8 times 40 is now 320 physical damage. Not bad. Oops. Times 40. 440. So what was that difference? 3 times... It's a reduction of 120 damage, which is kind of a lot. 320, yeah. So definitely much worse, but it just means that at level 1, it's not going to be as ridiculous as it was before. Because you could get at level 1 unless, and you could just run with people and trade with them. And it worked really well because, let me turn this off. Because Leshrac is really fast. His base strength is not, that's actually okay, 560. His base damage is pretty garbage. But yeah, he's 325 moves. He's got 4 legs, you know, it makes sense. So a little nerf to Leshrac support. Lifestealer Rage cooldown increased by 2 seconds. That's pretty costly. He's got the Rage duration at 25. So that puts it to 8 out of 18, which is still less incredible. But you compare Lifestealer with like Coddle, for example, to lower the cooldown. That'd lower it by 6 down to 12. So you can't perma. You could perma with Coddle, and that's not true. You'd be 8 out of 12. But just a little nerf to Lifestealer. Can't use Rage as often in fights. It's definitely becoming more of a BKB here. Agility increase here for Lina. That's pretty huge, actually. So that's an increase of 7 base. So she has 7 more attack speed at level 1, which is pretty huge because she has a shit animation. And more agility gain. So a little bit more armor going into the late game. This is actually pretty big. This is a huge, huge agility buff. They've been trying to fix some of Lina's late game situation stuff. She has armor problems late game. She dies a little bit too fast. You have to buy... armor, and you have to buy BKB, and you have to still buy your other items. So it's like it was kind of hard to solve all of her problems. But 0.3 agility gain is also like what, 25 levels. That's like an extra 9 agility. She basically, in late game, she has an extra 15 agility, which is pretty big. That's like what, 3 armor, 2 armor? What's the current numbers? I'm on fire. 0.16. I think it's 1 out of every 7. It's at 1 out of 6.25. So what did I say? She had an extra like 15 armor. So that's an extra 2.4 armor late game. That's pretty fucking huge, actually. That's really, 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 really huge. So Lina has at level 1, she has 1 more armor, which is massive. And late game, she has, what was it, 2.5? 2.4 armor more late game. So that's a pretty huge buff for Lina, considering that she does usually buy raw HP items. Like, I don't know if, I guess you don't buy Ags much, but you buy a lot of stat items on Lina. So that's a pretty big increase. Definitely will be nice against physical carries in the late game. Mars getting nerfed finally, strength gain reduced, so less just beefiness for free. Spear of Mars vision AoE reduced, and God's Rebuke mana cost increased. I think that was needed. And the talents... the stun duration has gone down. Yeah, I don't think anybody got Spear of Mars damage for 200. Everybody would go Spear Stun for 1.5, which would put it at 4.3 3 seconds. Now it's only going to be 3.8. So it's going to be less able to use Spear with ulti to just get easy kills. The strength gain is definitely going to matter because Mars didn't buy that many survivability items. Typically, he would go like, I don't know, Phase, Soul Ring, get a Bracer or 2, and then he would buy like Vlad's, Blink Dagger, maybe a BKB, but now you may be more needed. You might need more survivability than typically. And the hero usually levels up pretty fast because you can kill a lot of heroes. So I think these are definitely needed nerfs. This one was definitely way too good. If you couldn't dodge the Spear, Mars could kind of roll over the game really well if he got to 20 fast with a Blink Dagger. Spear of Mars dealing 200 damage is still pretty good though, because reasonably, like, a lot of Mars's viability is definitely like dropping the ulti and spearing a guy to the shields and killing that one guy at the start of the fight. But it's not a bad idea to be able to like throw the spear through like 5 heroes and do 500 damage. That's kind of crazy damage if you think about it too. And he can also hit them with God's Rebuke hypothetically. But mana cost increasing by 10 is significant because with Soul Ring, Spear of Mars is 100, this is now 80. Soul Ring would cover 150 of the 170, now it's 150 of the 180. So the hero is going to have more mana problems now for sure. Slightly more, not that much. You may, but between like Vlad's and Soul Ring, you're basically covered all game. I would once in a while go back to heal or use the shrine, so I don't think this is going to affect Mars that much. Maybe this will. The vision thing is usually something that is hard to understand how important it is, but you know, if you don't necessarily have vision of the guy or the guy behind the guy that you speared, it'll make a big difference. It mattered for Grimstrokes, Stroke of Fate for sure. You could use that for crazy good vision before. Naga Siren Mirror Image Illusion incoming damage reduced again. So this is another buff to Naga Siren. I think this is probably fine. I know he was picked at the tournament, but my main criticism for Naga Siren as a core is that it's very difficult to always abuse your illusions when it's on such a set cooldown. Obviously, you can buy Manta later, and people are going like Diffusal Manta, so you do have multiple illusions available, but it's easy, it's straightforward to counter these sometimes. There's things like Dagon as well now to one-shot them. You can use Mana Drain, for example. Reducing the damage that they take, I think, is completely fair, because just a couple AoEs can pretty easily deal with these usually, and you do have to buy a lot of agility items to make your illusions deal decent damage, so you can't always just... Like, Radiance into Heart, for example, was kind of broken because the Radiance burn, when it dealt full damage, was like every single illusion had the benefit of like a 5,000 gold item. And it didn't matter if it was an illusion near you because it just did a buttload of damage. But now that the Radiance damage was reduced, just going Radiance into Heart had to be like you protecting your hero and not your illusions. So then if you want to make them viable, they have to right-click well and fast, so you have to buy agility items. But then if they still die too fast, it's like you can't increase their HP fast enough. It just makes it a little bit too hard. So this is probably reasonable in my mind, because you can still deal with them with AoEs and AoE disables, but pretty much any damage could deal with them before, in my experience. Omni-Knight base armor increased by 1. I know he was picked by some teams. Pain liked him. He was useful in that game, I felt, because he was laning versus a melee hero. I don't know if other teams picked him or not, but I am not quite sold on Omni-Knight yet. I think laning against melee heroes, he's really good, but 1 armor is certainly going to help him be more viable. 4.4 armor now base. Strength gain's fantastic, his other stat gains are crap, but between like Purification, and Purification's cast range is kind of shitty and all, but it feels like Heavenly Grace is like the ability now that's really made him fantastic. For the Strong Dispel is nice, and the Status Resistance is really good too. I think that change was probably needed, because I don't think Omni-Knight is quite in viability just yet. Oracle is probably one of the strongest supports right now, certainly one of the strongest of the tournament. False Promise getting 15 seconds added to all levels, so basically really helps Oracle hit 25 faster to get the cooldown down, but also really hurts him if he is not staying alive through team fights. But False Promise is fantastic on cores that get initiated on, obviously, because you can pretty much guarantee keep them alive, especially if you have an urn or they have a wand. False Promise mana cost increased to scale. I think that's fine. It's not going to make that big of a difference. Oracle typically has too much mana late game anyways, because his int gain is really good. You often buy Arcane Boots. False Promise cast range rescaled. I think this is going to be the biggest nerf by far. The cooldown one is pretty moderate. This is not a bad a nerf at all, especially the late game one. But the cast range this is huge, because now you have to be much closer to your ally to save him. If somebody's out of position, it's harder to save them if they get lassoed, for example. 1,000 cast range was just so big. So this is going to make something like Tranquil Boots maybe a little bit more appealing on Oracle to make him faster, to be able to catch up to allies that are out of position. If you're getting engaged on and you're not organized or together, False Promise is going to be way less effective as well. So this is, I think, a nice nerfs to Oracle that's not going to break his ability to play the game. It's just going to make him a little bit more harder to use, which I think is a really good way to balance the hero. They didn't nerf his abilities like what the abilities do. It just nerfs your ability to use them at all points and in all situations. Lucky Shot can no longer apply both silence and disarm at the same time. Thank fucking God. Lucky Shot chance reduced to 17%. The skill is really annoying, basically. Pangolier, definitely a very effective hero. Rolling Thunder mana cost also increased by 50 at the 2nd and 3rd levels. So more mana problems late game, but that's fine, because by then you're going to have Greaves or Arcanes. It could affect some situations, of course. He'll be more vulnerable to mana burn, for example. Or if he has long fights. But this really needed to happen, I think. What's interesting about this is I don't quite know how this works. Does this mean that if... let's demo the hero really quick to test. Because, especially in ability draft, not that this matters, obviously, but it was pretty annoying, I must say. I'm just going to give this guy a bunch of health. I'm going to give myself a bunch of attack speed. Oops, no, I want more than that. No, I want more than that. Okay, that's probably maxed out. So, what this means is, whichever one you apply first, if you proc Lucky Shot again, all you're doing is refreshing that duration. So in some ways, this is better for Pangolier. It's actually not that bad of a nerf. It's kind of cool. It's basically like, if you like what you got, you can keep it, basically. You can attack more. So if you do proc a silence on a guy that you want to stay silenced, you just got to keep attacking him. You can basically perma-silence people a lot easier now. Because 17 is not super low. Oops. I mean, because it lasts pretty long, right? Up to 5 seconds. So within 5 seconds, you just need to attack them enough to proc it again. That's 1 out of every, like... It takes about 5.8 attacks now to proc Lucky Shot. So if you can attack more than once per second, you have a decent chance of keep reapplying the silence or disarm on them. So hypothetically, Pango could become a hero who gets a little bit of attack speed and focuses on attacking the PA, for example. If there's a PA that you don't want to attack, you can continuously attack that one hero to keep applying Lucky Shot to them so that they just simply can't attack. But if you get the one that you don't want, arguably you want to not attack them until it goes away. The other thing that's really important is that now you can't apply 2 instances of it on. Well, it's not just the fact that it's both silence and disarm. My guess is that you can't double slow somebody now. Because before, if you got both procced, they would be slowed by 35% twice, which is huge. When you got slowed by 2 Lucky Shots, it was really obnoxious. I remember sometimes as supports were just like a Pangolier illusion I couldn't deal with, because it could slow me down to like no movement, and if there were enemies kind of nearby, they could pretty easily jump and kill me. So I remember I couldn't deal with illusions. But now maximum the slow is probably 35, and you can't be slowed by both. But there is the upside that if you get the one that you want, that you have a better chance of being able to perma apply it. So it's not all bad for Pangolier, but it's certainly a nerf, because the double application was busted. Couldn't cast spells, couldn't attack, you're literally useless. But now at least like you can either attack or cast spells. So I think that was a nice change to the hero that still makes it semi-interesting while lowering the cooldown. I'm super down. And that's probably why they reduced the percentage in addition to this, is because if you can reapply the same one reliably and know which one's going to reapply, then it should reduce the percentage chance, because there might be some obnoxious situations where like you just perma-silence an Ember Spirit forever, basically. So somebody like Pangolier against an Ember Spirit when he's split pushing could be incredible now, for example. Or other core, you know. Dream Coil no longer latches on spell immune units for non-scepter version, primarily affects new leash status effect, which is good. I believe this is one of the reasons Puck was used a bit, because you could use Dream Coil against Rolling Thunder, for example, and then it would leash to Rolling Thunder, because even though you're spell immune, and then when you try to break through, you would get Dreamcoil stunned. Is that true? No longer latches on spell immune units for non-scepter version. I think I'm gonna have to test this out. I can't remember. I don't know exactly how it works because I don't watch the games. Let's see if I can remember how to spawn heroes. Create hero. It worked. Oops. Create hero. Okay. Level bots 25. So, so he can't use his ultimate while he's tethered because he's rooted. And now I shouldn't be able to hit him with this. It won't affect him. But if I get Ags, let's see what happens. So if I get Ags, it'll be the same thing. He can't cast it, which we both know. Just wait for that to run out, even though it's going to last forever. Man, that lasts long. But now if he does this, he actually just stops in place. Okay, so that's fucking busted. So what was basically happening before is that if Puck used his ultimate on Pangolier at any point during his Rolling Thunder, it would stop his movement 100%, which is busted. So that's probably why Puck was getting picked as like a Pango counter. But now you have to buy Scepter for that to work, which is fair. At least it takes an item, not just hitting level 6 to hard counter the other guy's ulti. So there's a buff to Pangolier, another buff to Pangolier that makes Puck less of a counter. But at least it costs, you have to buy an Axe now. Also changing, okay. The level 10 talent of Armor that almost nobody got ever is changed to cast range, and they've changed the this talent from int to stats. So 5 to all stats instead of 10 int is arguably not terrible for Puck. It's only 5 int instead of 10, which is a negative. And if Pucks are playing really well, they don't really need the health, is why they skip the armor as well. They just want the damage and the intelligence. But I don't think this is terrible. This is nice for bad players too, because it'll help them have more HP and agility to stay alive if they do get caught. So I think this is fine and overall good for the game. Cast range is not the most incredible, because that's going to increase the cast range of Dreamcoil. It's going to increase the cast range of your Orb, which is not terrible, 125, but it's not going to change Waning Rift. It will also change your items. So you can blink from farther away. You can use Force Staff on allies from farther away. You can use Yules. You can use Veil, all that stuff. So cast range could be good some games. If you go Dagon, for example, having a longer Dagon range could be really nice. And most Pucks do get a Dagon eventually, especially between like the Spell Amp. Yeah, interesting. Pudge Flesh Heap regeneration increased. I think this is really nice. I like this. It used to scale, it was at 3, 6, 9, 12. Now it's 5, 8, 11, 14. So you basically get an extra 2. It's basically justifying you getting 1 Flesh Heap pretty early on. This is kind of insane to think about, actually, if you get this at like level 2. You should probably get it like level 3 minimum at the latest, but this is a lot of regen. 5 regen is huge. That's a freaking Ring of Health, guys, for 1 skill point. That's super worth getting. And if you do get any kills now, you get a strength bonus. Like, it's 2 extra free regen. That just feels way too good to pass up to me. Like, hypothetically, you could even just get Flesh Heap at level 1 and attack people with a Stout Shield. I think that's viable, potentially. It's really not that bad if you think about it. Like, fight level 1 like crazy. You've got crazy good base damage. Your base damage is 65 to 71. Yeah, you've got no armor, but screw it, dude. You could just buy, like... You could go into a game and be like, alright, I'm playing 4 Pudge. I'm level 1. I'm going to zone enemy heroes. This is what I'm going to buy. 200 gold on Stout Shield. I'm going to get, like, a Tango. That's 290. You could buy Ring of Protection. And maybe like a Mango or something. I don't know if you can afford all this. This is 475 plus 90 is 565. So you probably can't afford a Mango if you do this. But hypothetically, getting like a Ring of Protection from the side shop or something like that, or increasing your armor in some way outside of just Stout Shield, and then I should have turned Flesh Heap on. Let's check my regen numbers. It's probably not good to get Flesh Heap level 1, but level 2. Like 2.5, boom, 7.5 regen per second. It basically turns you into an ogre kind of like hero. with more viability, kind of. So I think this looks pretty solid. That looks really, really good, especially as a core. I mean, going like Pudge core is going to be even more viable too. When I watched some people play like Pudge mid, they would go like 1-1-3 or something to get just a lot of regen in lane. You could probably get by with just one point now, maybe 2 points if you really need it. But 1 point of Flesh Heap is basically going to turn Pudge into a viable, semi-viable laner for light harass. If you still kill him, or try to kill him, he still has no armor, so he's still killable. But that's a really nice buff to the hero, and again, same thing. It's going to make the hero more playable for bad players too, which I think is really good. You don't have to finish Tranquil Boots to feel like you have a regen salvation now, which is really nice. You can just get a level, which everybody can do. I like that. Queen of Pain base armor increased by 1. 3.5, that's getting pretty good. I think she's semi-viable as an offlane or 4-position hero. Myself, an extra armor is definitely going to help. Playing her mid is certainly viable as well in the right matchups, but she's not as good as a lot of other heroes, of course. But I think our ulti is becoming quite good right now. Sand King Sandstorm damage upped again, back up towards regular levels, towards like 100 at level 4. 25 damage gain per level. I actually haven't played Sand King since they reworked him. Maybe I should. His stacking is really garbage is the problem though. He's got terrible agility and int gain. His base damage is not great, it's 50. His base armor is pretty crappy. His mobility is really low. So he's kind of like this like slow, bad stacking hero. So he doesn't really like the issue is basically you just don't have much damage outside of like epicenter combos, basically. Damage on Burrow Strike is okay. Sandstorm damage is now better, much better. But you have to get Caustic Finale kind of to lane, and I don't think that's really that great. Hypothetically, you could do stuff like Caustic Finale, push out the wave, do a side pull now. So that could be more viable, for sure. But it costs all these points just to get Sandstorm to be respectable and to get Caustic to be respectable. And then you just don't have that much damage. So I don't know, he feels kind of like a weird hero to me. Sandstorm DPS, Epicenter attack slow. That one's really weird. That's a really weird talent. It's a cool idea, but just like 80 attack speed slow for I guess it lasts for 3 seconds. That's kind of nice. 10 armor, epicenter pulses. There's one guy that I played solo queue with the other day and someone was talking about him. He always goes like E-Blade. He seemed like an okay Sand King player. I kind of like the E-Blade idea, but Sand King is definitely very much like a sit around and hit creeps and keep hitting creeps and don't stop hitting creeps hero. But he is good at ganking too, so I don't know. Maybe offlane Sand King is viable. I think I could enjoy playing him for sure. Get last hits, try to stay in the lane, maybe build a Vanguard or something first. Could be the solution since his armor is low. Lane longevity, then you just AFK farm like a Blink Dagger and a Soul Ring or something. Not sure. I could see that. Soul Ring being semi-good on the hero. Armor, Epicenter Pulses, Health Regen, Sandstorm, Slow and Blind. I don't know. I really like the hero, it's just I haven't played him in forever. Shadow Shaman, he's definitely not viable as a support because his skills are just not that great. There's much better heroes than what he does, and they have better attacks and they're ranged usually. I guess they're less survivable, but Shaman base int reduced by 2, that's going to reduce his damage by 2, which is not that much, but reducing his mana by 24 is definitely big. But Shaman's just really good right now. I think Disables are just fantastic at the moment. Plus he pushes towers. But he has such good base damage, like very few heroes can trade well against him. Glaive's damage is buffed. I think this kind of needed to happen. They over-nerfed it a little bit too much, unfortunately. It's not really going to matter that much for support silencer, but for core silencers, slightly more viable. Mystic Flare damage increased. Okay, 100 extra damage at level 1. Possibly as a result of Skies kind of just skipping Mystic Flare. They'll go like the Topson way, where they'll just get like max out Concussive, then max out Silence. Or they'll go, the Topson way is actually you go mid, you go max out Bolt and Concussive together. And you just skip the Silence. You just kind of like out harass your opponent. But he seems to like doing that, like skipping ult. I saw him play a sniper game where he went 4-4-0-0. One game, that was kind of interesting too. But it's only good for the hero. That's a lot of damage. Definitely things I want to try out. Shrapnel replenish time reduced by 10 seconds. I think that's great. Makes late game shrapnel more viable. Take aim active cooldown reduced by a lot at level 1. So 9 seconds for that. You can double the bonus range for 1 attack for 30 mana here. So the more points you have, the farther away you can attack. In terms of his cooldown reduction, this should reduce the charge restore to 30 seconds. And most people do get the cooldown reduction at 10. So 30-second shrapnel recharge instead of 40 is great. The fact that it's 40 instead of 55, like it was 55 a short time ago. 40 is like ridiculous. It makes shrapnel so much better. Because if you use it too much in lane, it's just gone. If you use it too much in fights, it's gone forever. You can't use it for farming. It's definitely a very finicky ability. I think this is a nice adaptation. And it's also going to make the shrapnel slow more tempting. That one is cool and all, because you can get up to 50% movement speed slow for shrapnel, but it just seems so bad because it's like, when am I gonna, how could I ever justify like a slow on a shrapnel that I can almost never use? Over 40 attack speed. 40 attack speed is insane when you do your damage with headshots and other damage items. So maybe like Veil Sniper is back, or Atos Veil. I mean, Veil is, or Atos is better. I should do that. I should try the nuke sniper build again. Atos may be overkill. Maybe Veil's better to start with. But you can't do as much damage with shrapnel now. But the slow is really, really good. Maybe Atos isn't needed if you get shrapnel slow though, because you're going to be slowing them down so much. 50% is really, really, it's huge. I could see something like that. I could see Veil being much better. It sucks to skip attack speed though, I must say. Really, really sucks. But you could go something like, I don't necessarily think like offline sniper is viable at all or anything, but maybe. It's going to push the lane a lot. It could work. Maybe. You'd need like a really strong support to go with you. Basically like Veil to increase your magic damage by 25%. Maybe go Atos afterwards. They're both similar in cost. Building Veil now kind of sucks though, because you don't get null talismans. But armor, all this int, the int is kind of overkill is the other thing. So I think it's kind of a waste to go both. You probably have to go Veil over Atos, I feel like. This is just so much int. It's way more int. He already has a really good int gain. So it feels like a waste. But the root is nice as well, because then you can stop them from running at you. I just can't imagine that it's worth building both. That just feels a little bit unnecessary to me. You could go Dagon afterwards. You can go E-Blade is probably the item that I thought would be best. Veil E-Blade. Cast range isn't really worth it, because it only makes like your E-Blade better, arguably. You could go Meteor Hammer too though. That'd be kind of fun. Probably really garbage though. Because you could always transition to actual damage instead of like a fucking E-Blade. Or a Meteor Hammer. I'd go like E-Blade Dagon maybe. Sounds really fun. I should try it again. Maybe Atos is okay after all. Or maybe like a Hex is probably better. Something like a Hex is probably more ideal. Spirit Breaker, Charge of Darkness, cooldown reduced by 1. Storm buffs, 1 extra into level 1, that's 12 mana. Slightly more int gain. Static Remnant damage increased by a little bit late game. And Vortex pull distance increased by 40 at all levels, which is pretty big. Again, this doesn't slow your hero anymore. It only disables enemies. So you can use Vortex early on. The distance it's a little bit. Mana cost is really low. Little storm buffs, they'll matter. That's a 0.2 int times 25. So like 4 more int late game. So just a tiny bit, but it'll help. Agility gain increased for TA, meld duration, debuff duration increased by 2 seconds. That makes it much easier to stack it, because remember you can stack it. So instead before it was 8 armor reduction with a cool duration of 10. Now it's 8 armor reduction with a duration of 12. So now you have a 4-second window to restack it. Ursa base armor reduced by 1. Here's still too good. Its armor is still really good. It was like even higher before. We're almost done here. Venomancer Poison Nova Scepter damage increased. Man, they were like really trying to tell Venomancers to buy Ags first. They're trying really hard. They're like, guys, please don't skip your ultimate. Russian Ags. That's actually so much damage. Where's our calculator? I deleted the screen region. Did I? I did. I think that was just the other window. Alright, check this shit out. So, before, just now, without Ags, it does a lot of damage right now. 40 times 18 does 720 damage at level 1 right now. 720 over 18 seconds. Level 2, 65 times 18. 1,000 damage. 1,000 damage for a level 2 ultimate. And then 90 times 18. There are a lot of like tranquils and oops. 90 times 18. 1,600 damage at level 3. But now with Ags, it makes it level 1 Scepter does more damage by far than wow, the cooldown is really interesting on the Ags. Level 1 Ags is far better than the level 2. Times 18. 1,350 damage. I think it was, what, 700 damage before? 720? 720 versus 1350. It's not twice as much. It's a little bit less than twice as much. But 1350 damage if you get Ags over 18 seconds. It's insane. 75 damage per second. That's like a really, it's like a real ass nuke. I can't imagine it is a bad idea to play Veno and rush Ags, genuinely. Because you need stats on the hero anyways. A lot of people buy things like Force Staff and they buy all these other weird items first. Why don't people just buy fucking Ags, dude? It's raw HP, helps keep you alive, helps you stay alive for them to die first. I don't know, people have not touched Veno in quite a while, it feels like. The cooldown's weird though, it goes 140, 120, 60. So it doesn't affect your cooldown at all until you get to late game. Then it's a 60-second cooldown. Very weird. Very, very weird. And I also can't help but think, like, man, Poison Nova with an Ags and an Octarine, it must just be insane regen. Because you're dealing 125 damage per second in an ultra late game, right? 125? That's affected by Spell Amp and damage resistance. I don't know, let's say after reduction it's doing like 80 damage. You're still getting 25... You're still getting 20 HP per second per hero. If you have an Ags on Veno with an Octarine core late game. It's kind of bonkers. If you catch a whole team, you're getting 100 HP per second. It just feels a little insane that people aren't really prioritizing Ags too much still. It's like people just forget that Poison Nova is a good ultimate. And it's always been really good with Ags. And with Veil, God, with Veil, this shit's insane. If you buy like Veil Ags on Veno, damage is so good. I mean, you don't need a demo. I just did the math. It's ridiculous. Does he have a Spell Lifesteal talent? Oh, he does. At level 20. It's either Spell Lifesteal or Poison Over Duration. Like, I forgot about that talent. He's got a GPM talent. He's got a Venomous Gale cooldown talent. I do really like his talents right now. It sucks for ability draft, but it's really good for letting you choose which build you want to go. Do you want more Gale stuff? My little dog. Do you want more Poison Sting? Poison Nova duration is probably hard. And there's an AoE talent, like 800 AoE. We've seen that. All right, I'll demo that. I've shown it before, but it's been a while since I just was trying really hard, guys, to get you to trying really hard to get you to play fucking Venomancer. All right, here's ultimate. It's pretty big. It's like a big AoE, right? GPM, Gale Impact, summons 2 wards. Oh, it's pretty good, but an 8% slow. Anybody that gets hit by a Plague Ward is slowed for 25%. It's crazy, dude. It's so good. Poison Nova duration, 7 seconds is insane. It's an extra like 700 damage if they get hit by it. Obviously, it's not often that the fight is still going 25 seconds later. But if you think about it as like you bomb their whole team and you're pushing a tower, they just can't fight for like an extra 7 seconds. That seems pretty good. But free spell, so now you don't even have to buy Octarine to get the lifesteal. So if you're in some kind of a contested team fight, 15% spell lifesteal, you're now getting like what, 15 health per second instead. That's a little bit less, like probably like 13, 14. If you have Ags and you're level 18 and you ulti one guy, it's potentially kind of crazy. It's definitely crazy potentially. I feel like it would be hard for me not to grab Poison Nova duration myself, but all right, you guys want to see the range increase? Look at this. Everybody gets hit. Everybody gets hit. If you have a freaking Blink Dagger and Aghanim Scepter, you're like, alright, here's all the enemies. I'm just like, run away. Look at that. Everyone gets hit. You got hit 25 and all, but like, got him. Taking this damage for, what was that, 25 seconds? It's fucking crazy. Nobody does this. Everyone's so infatuated with the Plague Wards. Anytime I see Venomancer, they're always like, look at them wards, guys. They're relying on these wards that do not hero-based damage. They do like piercing, which is reduced by like half against heroes. And they're like, let's triple that damage. So it's 20 hero damage times 3. They do like 60 damage to heroes. It's garbage. That's really not very good. Plague Wards are a method to apply Poison Sting. Then you use BKB and murder them. Yeah, I don't know, man. It's time to play Venomancer. They're like, hey, dumbasses. Veno has really good ultimate. Y'all forgot about it because everyone got so obsessed with like going Poison Sting and wards and like being passive and shit. Just fucking ulti people, dude. It's good. You do have to ideally Gale both heroes. It really helps, obviously. But anyways, more Viper nerfs, agility gain nerf. This is pretty big. It's going to be a lot of armor. It's like a point or two of armor late game. And less damage. Nether Toxin cooldown increased from 5 to 6. Completely fair. Hey, don't lick your paw. I'll get you in a bath soon, okay? Don't lick your paw. Okay? Good little dog. Okay, Windranger base strength increased by 1. Focus fire attack speed increased by 25. So, more damage from Focus Fire. Keep in mind it doesn't max out your attack speed like it used to. This is a 50 attack speed increase, by the way, from where it was before. The damage reduction is still pretty significant for physical damage. I played a Windranger game recently with lower MMR friends, so it was like I had to snowball the game. So I played Windranger and it went really well. I don't know if I got uploaded or not. Base strength is definitely needed. Her base health is not great. 560 is a little bit better, for sure. But her base stats are not great. As game goes on, her stats are fantastic, though. And her skills are all still really good. But you do need at least a Javelin for Focus Fire to be good, more or less. The game I was against a PA, and I rushed MKB. I think people are a little bit too afraid to rush MKB, myself. It's really, 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 really good damage for the cost. Zeus Intelligence increased, base and gaining and static field damage increased. This probably needed to happen. Static field only applies if your abilities hit them. It's no longer an AoE. So most people aren't even getting static field until like level 12 or something. I think that's a mistake. I think you should get 1 point by 10 for sure. And I did so in my guide. I've been making or updating and making new guides lately with help from my editor, Ctech. Yeah, I got one at 8 on my build. I don't think anybody else, when I was looking, had been doing this. But I just can't justify not getting static field at some point. Like, they're maxing arc laning first, so the damage, for example, scales by 25 per level. I think it's completely fine to get 2 points by all means, increase the jumps, and it's nice to get it to the 4 points of jumps, and it jumps 15 times instead of 9. But how many times do you really need it to jump 15 instead of 9? And for every extra point of arc laning you're only getting 25 damage. But if you have a static field point instead, you're getting 5% of their current health being reduced. So if somebody's at 1,000 HP and they get hit by static field, that's 50 damage. 1,000 HP, 1 point of static field, 50 damage dealt extra. That's twice as much as an arc laning point would give. I think it's worth it to get at least 1 point, but it's not really worth it early on anymore, most likely. Because everybody's health is usually like, what, 600 to like 1,000 early game. Having more arc laning points to hit creeps or to last hit creeps or to push creeps, more lightning bolts to deal damage. It's just not worth it early. But yeah, it going up by a percentage I think is completely fine. I don't think the static field talent is probably going to be worth it. Maybe if it was a 2% or something. It is nice that your Thunder God's Wrath now applies static field globally. That part's really cool. So it's really good use at the start of the fight. Your Nimbus applies static field. That's really good. But for the other majority of situations, static field is not very good. That's for sure. Your Nimbus doesn't get cooldown reduction anymore. Yeah. Anyways, need to regrow my mustache. Technically, I'm close. I haven't shaved in a while, but I am going to shave soon. It has been a while since I did mustache. It's probably time, huh? Okay. Well, that's the patch. I am pretty happy. It's not that small, but it definitely got my creativity going a little bit here. Definitely lots of interesting things that I want to try out. That explains why I was confused. It was listed as something else. Sky Atos Mystic Flare viable. If you are a core, yes. I think if you are a support, no. It takes too long to make Atos in most other situations. I mean, if you're playing offlane, you're doing really well, and you keep buying crowns and you get really tanky, absolutely could be viable. Definitely could. I know a lot of skies will just skip boots. I don't think that's necessarily good. They just buy more like Null Talisman. Null Talismans are really good on Sky, though, because it increases Arc Bolt, it increases Arcane Bolt damage, and increases Spell Amp, so it increases it even more. Null Talismans are really, really good. But you can buy crowns as well. You could go like double null with the boots, or like double null wand boots, and then start buying crowns. Oops, not Dagon. Although Dagon on Skies, it's a little bit one-dimensional, but I mean it is amplified by his other stuff. Buy like a double crown, swap one out for a staff, finish Atos. Against certain heroes it could be good. Against like Ember Spirits, I could definitely see Rod of Atos being really effective. Against Weavers, things like that. Heroes that you can't quite get in Silence cast range on before casting, it could be really effective. Maxine Shrapnel and power farming versus a Tinker who couldn't keep up. Yeah, I'm sure it's pretty good right now. Test if Orchid plus Halberd allows you to choose your lucky shot proc on Pango. That's an extremely situational thing that might ever happen in a Dota game, but I'll test it for you. Am I beginning now? Nope, that's the end. Let's do one of these, and one of these, and one of these. And then Halberd. It's probably going to allow it to select it randomly because they're not lucky shot. They're different types of disable. And then I need some attack speed. I think. Oops, that was really close. I think that chose. It was disarm that time, obviously, right? So we'll try it again. That was weird. So this one was silenced. He was silenced before it ended. I didn't get any procs while he was disabled. That was really weird. There it goes. Yeah, they're different abilities, so it's not deterministic based on what a buff is still applying. So yeah, it's flexible. Okay, cool. So let me run some ads. I'm gonna go to the bathroom quick, and then I'm gonna play some games. Definitely want to play Veno. Be right back.